Very good evening to you. 5th of September. Thanks for clicking on to the tropical update for this evening. We're going to be quite busy over the course of this week, folks, as we look at Lee and its remnants across the US and particularly across the Appalachian chain over the next few days, as we see a deep plume of moisture flowing all the way from the southern Gulf up into the Appalachian chain. And of course we've seen 10 to 15 inches of rain across Louisiana over the course of the weekend, and flooding of course as a result. But the concern actually is becoming now, as the moisture and the energy now starts to meet those the elevation of the Appalachian mountains. The fear is of course that some of the mountain locations could see upwards of 10, perhaps even more inches of rain, and that of course raises the threat of flash flooding. So my personal fear is that actually the worst of Lee's remnants actually could be worse than what we've seen across Louisiana and Mississippi. Now I do believe there was reports of 11 inches of rain across Mississippi, creating flash flooding. But as that moisture and the energy associated with Lee then meets the mountains and rides up the Appalachian spine, I do fear that we're going to see some communities reporting some flash flooding and some pretty devastating flooding indeed. As for Katia, it's just below Category 3 strength, major strength. It's 110 mile per hour sustained winds with its core, and it's looked dramatically more impressive in satellite imagery. It underwent an eye-wall replacement cycle, and then once it completed that cycle where the inner portion, the old eye collapses and basically collapses within itself, and a new eye on the outside of that forms. That's what's happened, and we're seeing a very, very impressive looking satellite image at this time. And actually, to be honest with you folks, it looks as if it's a Category 3 at the moment, going by satellite imagery. But the pressure now down to 965, so it is dropping, and we've seen a relaxing of the wind shear. Of course, there was a couple of troughs that were to the north of Katia over the past several days. That was indeed inducing some wind shear, and therefore holding the system. Remember, it was bouncing between tropical storm and hurricane strength. Well, that's relaxed, and therefore we've seen a pretty marked increase in intensity of Katia, and it looks as if this system will become a Category 3. I'm going to show you quickly the current overlook of the Atlantic basin at the moment. Now there, folks, is Katia. Looking quite impressive, to say the least, folks. Here you can see a nice distinct eye here, very symmetric. You can see good inflow and outflow, and the system certainly looks very impressive, and certainly looks as if that's a Category 3 hurricane, if you ask me. As for Lee, you can see here, folks, the system's about here, okay? But what I want to show you folks is, you can see, number one, the dry air across the southern plains. But look at this here, folks. We've got almost a plume of moisture non-stop from the eastern Pacific across Central America and all the way up across the Gulf of Mexico and over the very warm waters, remember. So this could be a problem, folks, because if you've got a southwesterly flow, remember, folks, we've got tropical storm force conditions across the Gulf of Mexico still, even though the centre's here over southern Mississippi or even Alabama. You've got a very potent southwest flow, an injection of deep tropical moisture all the way across the Gulf of Mexico. Remember, waters in the upper areas that are around 90 degrees, and that is making a very intense convection across the Gulf and pumping all that moisture up into the Appalachian Mountains, which of course are up here. And I fear that the worst of Lee is yet to come across the Appalachian Mountains. As for the rest of the Atlantic, of course we've got Lee, or Katia, but here is another system, folks, that we're watching closely. And this, it could, over the next 6 to 12 hours, become a depression
could even become a tropical storm. It's looking pretty impressive on satellite imagery. I'm going to pull you up quickly the look of Katia at the moment. Look at that there, folks. A beautiful looking hurricane. Of course, the RAF is beneath it. We've got very heavy seas, hurricane force winds, obviously. Nasty conditions. But certainly when you look at it on satellite imagery, it looks very impressive. As a matter of fact, folks, I actually think this is one of the most, if not the most, impressive looking hurricane of the season so far. And it's interesting to continue watching this. As for the track, I'm going to pull up a couple of things here for you because it's interesting that certainly the models are suggesting that Katia will remain off the east coast, and certainly that would imply that. I can't pull up the information at the moment, I apologise for that. But certainly what we're seeing is, folks, that the models are feeling the weakness in the western part